Parents of Reddit, what is the most darkling thing your children have said? My daughter and I were playing at the park when she told me she wants to burn bodies when she's older. Little creeped but okay. Turns out her granddad told me about the mortuary across the street and she saw the smoke billowing out. She still wants to cremate people. 60% of my graduating class in mortuary school were female, and the rate of cremation is going up steadily. Job security will be pretty good. When my niece was 3, she covered up my head with a blanket and held it down. I moved my head out where I could see her. She said, "You can't come out," and smothered me again. I laughed and said why. She gritted her teeth and angrily said, "Because I don't want you to." Run, bro. I can't remember if she was 3 or 4, but our little daughter's voice peeped up from the back seat one morning. "Dad, do babies bathe in blood?" Sweet mother, send your child into the for the sins of the unworthy must be baptized in blood and fear. My then 3 years old daughter walked downstairs in the morning and said, "Look what I can do," and she crossed her eyes. I asked her how she learned to do that and she said, "The boy taught me at night." Me, what boy? Her, the boy with the glasses. He did this and she held her finger up and zoomed it to her nose and crossed her eyes. She said he laughed and laughed. Not too scary, right? Only, that's how my brother taught me to cross my eyes when I was 5 years old. He died when I was 7 years old. That's really sweet. My young daughter said she made a new friend. Her mother and I are like, "Cool hun, what's her name?" "It's Casey Jr." So then we ask when we can invite her over to play. My kid says we can't, cause she's dead. Later that night, after putting my daughter to bed, I hear laughter and talking coming from her room. I go to investigate. As I get to the door, I hear my daughter say, "No, Casey, stop tickling me," amidst bouts of giggles. I walk into the room quickly, not knowing what to expect. There is just my daughter in the room, nothing else. Officially creeped out. I'm the chili in question here. My mother was reading The Stand when I was 3-4. There is a character called the Trashcan Man, who is basically a mentally disabled pyro with a penchant for blowing up trash cans, before being empowered by the villain to blow up much bigger things. Having read the book much later in life, there's a kind of twisted child vibe with this guy. One evening while she read alone in her room, I came skipping in singing, "The Trashcan Man, the Trashcan Man. He is gonna get you and you know he can." She claimed she got real serious and asked where I'd heard that, and I wouldn't say another word about it. There's also a story in which she claims I basically described being abducted by aliens and similarly shut up about it right after. I tend to think I was just an early expert troll. I bet you were a spicy lil chili. My mum stayed with us for a few months when my daughter was 3 or 4. When she moved out, the spare room was still called Nana's room. I asked my daughter to get something upstairs one day. She did and came back to me and said, "Who is that old lady in Nana's room?" Didn't go in that room ever again. Probably was just dark and saw some clothes or furniture in the shape of an old lady, since the kids' move associated the room with Nana. Either that or is haunted. This is actually a Reddit story. I saw a picture of a horse on our midline interesting and showed it to my daughter who was 2 at the time and loves horses. She says it's going to die soon and I was like, "What did you say?" and she repeated, "It's going to die soon." Eventually I figured out that she was talking about my phone battery being low. I used to work at a daycare that was adjacent to a large cemetery. Sometimes the kids would gather at the fence and stare into the cemetery talking about a little boy they wanted to play with. As it turns out, the part of the cemetery that bordered that fence was the same part where all the kids' babies were buried. It really freaked out some of the girls that worked there. I lived alone in a cool but kind of creepy old house with my son, who must have been close to 3 when this happened. I woke up one night because I heard him talking forcefully at something in his room. Not quite yelling, but at a level above normal conversation. I got out of bed and went down the long hallway to his room to find him sitting in the corner of his bed, glaring into the opposite corner of the room. I asked him what was wrong and, without taking his eyes off that far corner, which was at my back, he pointed and said, quietly and angrily, "Get that man out of my room." Every hair on my body stood up and I reached over to flip on the light. There was no one there, of course. He said the man came into his room a lot and he hated him. His voice was absolutely full of anger when he talked about the man. Then, he told me that there was a big brown rabbit that came and looked in his window every night. His bed was directly under a window, and he didn't like him, but he couldn't come in the house, so it was okay. He also claimed the house itself was a lady and it sang to him, which is a whole other story. I took him back to my room for the rest of the night, but the next day it was like it never happened and he went back to sleeping in his own room. After reading further, I'm convinced that 3-year-olds are conduits of some sort of dark weirdness. So this wasn't my kid, since he was only about 16 months when it happened, but I heard the following at the playground from another kid who was about 4 or 5. Kid, I can go down the slide really fast. Me, that's cool. Kid, can he do the slide? How old is he? Me, sort of, only on his tummy. He's only 1/2. Kid, oh, that's really young to die. Me, what? Yes, it is. He said it in the same tone a kid would say it's too cold to swim. No clue what made him say it. Kid has obviously been told you die if you go down the slide on your tummy. The other day my daughter drew some pictures. The first one she said, "That's me right there." I said, "What's the other thing?" "Oh, that's the fire. See, I'm pointing at it and telling you to run." Second one picture, "That's a building that fell down. There was a lot of fire." I think she was learning about fire drills at school, but IDK. Hopefully I don't have a little arsonist. When we moved into our previous house, she ran up to me crying and incredibly scared. She looked at me and said, "Mama, I don't want to go in there. It's really dark and scary." Me, "What are you talking about? It's okay. All of the lights are on." Daughter, "No mom, it's dark in there. I'm scared. They said they were going to take me." Me, "What are you talking about? Who's going to take you?" Daughter, "The monsters said they're going to take me and pull me in the wall. They said I had to stay forever. It's dark and I'm scared." She then pointed to a black ring on the wall where something large had been hanging and left a mark. I regret not listening to her because living in that house was terrifying. That ring wouldn't come off of the wall and was still perfectly visible after being painted over and bleached multiple times. TL. Dr. Monsters and the walls were lonely. Too late now, but you have to get rid of those stains by using 1-2 layers of oil-based primer on the whole wall, then painting it with latex paint. We were living at a house where a schoolmate of mine lived for 15 years before he committed suicide. One day my daughter said, "He's in the closet." "Who's in the closet?" "Nick. He looks scary, daddy." I went to pictures on his Facebook and asked her who it was, because we'd never talked about him before, and she said, "Oh, that's Nick." My mother-in-law was picking my son up from school because I had some crap to do. She was supposed to just drop him off. I really dislike that old witch. Instead he comes running through the door and yells, "Daddy, I invited grandma for dinner." Son, have I taught you nothing about vampires? My son, 5 at the time, woke up scared from a dream in the middle of the night. I asked him what it was about, which, in retrospect, was probably a mistake. He said that he had a dream where people turned bad and you could tell because their teeth turned pointy. Then, in the dream, he realized that his teeth were pointy. He woke up as he was trying to figure out how to hide his pointy teeth from everyone. I can dig it. The scariest thing is not that a monster is coming to get us. It's that we are the monster. We stopped looking for monsters under our bed when we realized they were inside of us. Joker. My son told me how many people were in the hospital room when he was born. He said dad, aunt, nurse, doctor. He placed them in their respective places, across the room, next to you. I've never talked about his birth to him. He was about 4 then. I asked him recently if he recalls his birth and he said number. What? I don't remember it at all. Mom. Geez. I was just a baby. Cripes, where to start? Recently my daughter said, "The blood of our enemies makes the finest dessert." Telling her about Paul Bunyan the other day, her first reaction was a very interested. "So there's a giant carcass someplace?" I'm using that first line if I ever write a novel. Thank you, creepy little human. My son had an imaginary friend named Sam when he was 3. He would talk to him and laugh when we weren't in the room. We would always play along with him, build his imagination and whatnot. We asked him, "What does Sam look like?" and he said, "He's small." like me, but he's not a kid. He has black hair and black eyes. I looked at my wife and laughed and said, "That doesn't sound like a nice friend." And he replied, "SHHH. He's right behind you." He wasn't allowed to play with Sam after that. I don't want children. I'm scared of the woman who lives in the attic. My stepfather's ex hung herself in the house. She has no recollection of the woman, but I remember her saying it. My baby sister said this. Obligatory, not a parent, but as a young child, age 3-5, I would sleepwalk into my parents' room and stand by their bed quietly. My dad would wake up, find me and try to put me back to bed. I would tell him I couldn't go back to bed because the tall men are walking. This stopped immediately after moving from that particular house. The tall men comment stopped. The sleepwalking continued and still happens. Then, when I was around 15, we were at church one day and I overheard one of the younger kids, 3, ask his parents, as they walked away, "Who are those men?" "What men, honey?" The tall men with Iboko. Didn't sleep well for a couple of nights after that. Iboko is my username, my username, from the names of the 3 dogs that my husband and I had when first dating. Had all of them from puppies. One died of cancer at 16, one of old age at 19, and the third is still with us and about to turn 17. Iris, Bonita, Cisco. An Iboko is a soul that has been cursed for a sin committed by their ancestors. Their only hope for atonement is to wander through life, repeating themselves incessantly in the hopes that somewhere, someone will actually listen. Sorry, I'm recovering from surgery and feeling kinda froggy. It was the Harlem Globetrotters, waiting, biding their time until they can help you solve a groovy mystery. My nephew at the age of 4 came up to me after a nap and vividly detailed another man's life. He was an Australian soldier in the early 1900s and had a brother in the army with him. They were cavalry soldiers and were sent to fight Turkey in the Gallipoli campaign. He told me about how they were in the desert for weeks with a battalion of men and how he hated the sand. Sometime his brother died in battle and he described being alone in a desert with his horse. The horse died from thirst and shortly thereafter he died from exposure, and then said, "And then I woke up." That freaked me the frick out. He was so young and didn't know the majority of what he was saying, but he knew details. Significant historical details. I never forgot about that day, but he did as he grew. Not so much something said as I wasn't around for most of it, but when my niece was 2-3 she had an imaginary friend named Christopher. Okay, cool, normal imaginary friend stuff. We had to leave a seat at the table for him sometimes or sit in a different chair because Chris was in the one you were about to sit in. She eventually told us that he was actually a ghost and a soldier. We later found out he was from the Civil War and would protect her from the bad spirits. See, Chris usually had to stay at her house because it was close to where he died. So sometimes when she was at other places, like my parents' house, the bad spirits would attack her, which generally looked like her screaming, crying, and cowering in fear. I witnessed this once, and it was very different from the fake crying that toddlers do. It would only last a few minutes until Chris would show up and fight them off. She apparently also always asked to go home after, since Chris couldn't stay away from home very long and she was afraid they'd come back once he left. Over the 2 years or so he was around, she would talk about all kinds of stuff about him and Civil War soldiers that she otherwise should not have known. This is actually kind of sweet. Chris is really looking out for her. Also, she lays the Civil War unit in American history. Not necessarily creepy, but about 2 years ago my aunt passed away very suddenly, leaving behind 5 kids, the youngest of which was about 4 at the time. We were at their house cleaning out their mom's stuff and she was sitting on the porch swing out front. Nobody could tell if she understood what was going on, but then she turned to me and said really quietly, "My mommy died yesterday. But that's okay, because I've already seen her lots of times this morning." It was kind of freaky but also comforting. Before I left on a business, my 2-year-old son told me I was getting on a scary plane and it was going to crash into a house. I have to admit I thought about it quite a few times before the flight. When my son was 3 he would often talk about events and people that happened before. Before what I never found out, but he would often talk about someone called John whose clothes were all ripped and a baby. Apparently John looked after this baby when its parents died, and sometime later my son ended up living with both of them. I'd ask questions, but it usually just made him upset. I asked why John's clothes were ripped and he said it was because he works hard all day. I asked him what work John did and he said he made boxes sometimes. What kind of boxes, I asked. He said they were blue ash. At the time I had no idea what blue ash was, so I googled it and it turns out it's a tree only found in the Midwestern states in the US. We're from the UK. I'd never heard of this tree before and I'm sure my son hadn't either. That creeped me out a bit. He's 5 soon and still gets upset if I mention John and the baby. Once he shouted at me that he never wants to talk about it again. He was also afraid of knives from a really young age. He'd freak out whenever he saw one. For the record, I don't really believe in past lives, but I think it's pretty neat to think about. I don't know if I came out with similar stuff as a child, but I did have a very strange dream that I think complements my son's stories. When he was only a few days old, I dreamt that both of us were on a farm. I don't know how I knew the person I was with was my son, as he was a boy aged around 10. Strangely, although not strange to me in the dream, I was also a young boy, maybe 4 or 5. We were brothers and we were standing in a barn during a thunderstorm. I was scared and holding his hand. We were wearing very raggedy clothes too. Spooky. Boxes sometimes. Common uses. Flooring. Millwork. Boxes, crates. Baseball bats, and other turned objects such as tool handles. Inexpensive and easily worked. It was often used to make inexpensive coffins. This one actually just happened with my 4-year-old a week or so ago. I woke up to her laying in the hallway whimpering and crying while still asleep. I woke her up to put her back to bed and asked if she had a bad dream. Barely awake, she said number. I remembered. Before I was born here I was a really bad dog and they made me go to sleep, and then started crying and saying she didn't want to remember it. When I asked the next morning, she said the same thing and got visibly upset again. I even have audio of her starting to tell me the story, getting upset, then changing the topic. Deliver that audio. I definitely continue to be impacted by this. We had just moved into our home. The first 2 nights, our 2 children stayed at their grandparents'. On the 3rd night, they spent their first evening in their new rooms. My wife asked my then 4-year-old daughter how her experience had been in her new room. Here is a recounting of the ensuing discourse. Daughter: it was pretty cool, except for the man in my room. Wife: you mean daddy, right? D: no, he was a bad man, a strange man. W: what do you mean? D: you know, he kind of had a skeleton face. He was a hoboken. He kept asking me weird questions. It was so funny the way he was dancing. No issues in her room since, and that was 4 years ago, but I surely spent some time talking to no one in her room as a result of that unexpected exchange. I had to share a room with my 4-year-old for a few weeks. Mummy, when you were sleeping, I woke up and there was a ghost with no face standing over you, touching your arm. It was taking your dreams out of your body with its mouth. Reminds me of the Dementors from Harry Potter, but he's never watched it. My fiancé works morning shifts and I work evening shifts, so we don't have to pay for daycare. Usually when I get home from work around 11, everyone, we have a 2 and 3-year-old, is already in bed, so I walk in the front door, take off my shoes, put away the groceries I bought, normal everyday stuff, go to walk up the stairs, and my 3-year-old daughter is standing on the landing, in the dark, just pointing at me. I screamed so loud, I woke everyone up, scared the crap out of me. Needless to say, I'm constantly on alert now for any creepy butt kids lurking in the shadows. When I was in 2nd grade, so 7 I think, my teacher asked us what we would want to do later in life. I told them I'd commit suicide. There's a lake over there. Points. Kids used to sleep underwater forever there. Okay. After a little bit of research, I discovered there was a lake roughly in the direction she pointed it. Nope. Not apparent, but when I was 4 years old, my dad's father passed away from bladder and lung cancer. It was really tough on my parents as they were taking care of him at home in his last months. The day after his funeral, we sit down to breakfast and little 4-year-old me says, I saw grandpa last night and he told me to tell you not to worry anymore, he's happy. My parents were completely taken aback by it. I did the same thing the following morning and then never mentioned anything ever again. I asked my dad about it today and he said that up until that day I had never told my parents about dreams I had. He said that it was a huge comfort to him to hear me say that, as I was far too young to make anything like that up and was not known to make up stories. TLDR. My grandfather came to me in a dream to let my parents know he was okay. Me, age 3. Where did the little girl go? Mum, glancing around the otherwise empty house. What little girl? Me, pointing up the stairs. The little girl who was crying. She didn't help with household chores, so she's gone now. We moved to a new house this summer in a cul-de-sac with deep woods surrounding it. I often go with my 4-year-old son in those woods to walk our dog. After a few times, my son said that this cloud person was acting silly. I asked what cloud person and he pointed to a direction and said him. I obviously didn't see anything. I didn't bother, figured he's a child with a great imagination. We go back couple of days after and he says that the same character is not being nice. I asked him why and he said he told me if I come back here, he will cut me in half from head to toe with a big knife so blood can come out. Keep in my mind, we are very strict with what our sons watch cartoon wise. He will watch Dora, Paw Patrol and things of that nature, so I have no idea where that came from. Regardless, it kind of creeped me out because he kept explaining in details how that person was acting when we got there. I went back with my mother and didn't say a thing about it and she just said she has weird vibes and wanted to leave. We never really followed up on it. Just didn't go back and he didn't mention it again. Sorry if my English isn't perfect. We were at a family reunion and my 5-year-old niece was playing with my 3-year-old daughter. My niece said she didn't want to be here. I asked why she didn't want to spend time with her family. She replied, "That's not my real family. My real mom died. I seen the video of it." Another time she was over to my house and my father came to see my daughter at the same time. My dad took them both outside to play. When he came in, he told me that my niece said, "Do you want to play stab? It's where we stab each other with sticks and whoever dies first off is the loser." That's what happens when you allow your child to watch horror movies at a very young age. My mom always tells us the time when she was reading my sister a bedtime story. My sister looks at her and interrupts saying, "Do you remember when I was the mommy and you were the child?" Her mother died when she was 19. I'm a kindergarten teacher. One of my kids told me I was going to have a little brother, but my mom killed him while he was still in her tummy by working too hard. That's screwed up because it makes you wonder if the kid heard an adult saying that behind the mother's back. My less than 3-year-old's dad speaks only German to her, and one of their favorite games is him saying was "Kann ich essen? Baby Speck zum Frühstück. What's to eat? Baby bacon for breakfast." And then nom-nomming her belly while she laughs hysterically. He's been doing this since she was born. One day while I was changing her, she pointed down to her belly genital region and said, "Eat it." I had a mini heart attack and started frantically questioning her, fearing the worst. After a minute of her confused and disappointed face, I realized she was also saying "Baby Speck" and "Frühstück" and just wanted me to play the game. She has been a little delayed with super intelligible speech, which is apparently common in multilingual households, so it took me minutes to hear the German parts. But it's always cool to realize that she is picking up the languages at least well enough to know the English translations. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.